In 2023, I had a dream. A dream which spawned from me and my friends clowning on a certain member of Kanto's Elite Four. A dream that at the time seemed almost meaningless and pointlessly tedious to achieve, but achievable nonetheless. This dream was to beat Bruno in Fire Red and Leaf Green with every single Pokemon from Kanto. Now, for those of you who watched the video and its follow-up, you'll know that I accomplished this goal pretty easily, and that was something that I expected. Bruno ain't and with unrestricted level caps and access to every item in the series up to that point, we easily trounced Bruno even with Pokemon as weak as Magikarp, Caterpie, and Ditto. But what I didn't expect from that video was the series it would inspire. In the last 6 months, we've taken the core concept of fighting a trainer with every Pokemon in their regional Pokedex and pushed it to its limit, refining our rules through the addition of level caps, item and move restrictions, ban lists, and a 2-round system. From a one-off joke video, we were able to create a legitimate challenge series. Throughout these videos, however, something hasn't been sitting right with me. We've refined the rules and found unique and fair ways to test these trainers and their strength, but Bruno himself, the very progenitor of this system, sits with a flawed PQ. Compared to our later opponents, who we challenged under our revised, fairer system, Bruno wasn't actually given a fair shake, having to contend with Pokemon at level 100, and with comparatively busted loadouts. So I wondered, how would he fare under the revised system, with Pokemon levels capped based on his ace level and team size, and items restricted to the point at which you fight him in the game? Would he still not be or would we discover that somewhere, deep down beneath the mediocrity, there was a competent trainer hidden? Of course, I still think Bruno ain't but in the name of science and integrity, I figured I had to test him fairly. So that's what we're here to do today. To recalculate Bruno's BQ and see what score he really deserves. For those new to the series, I'll put the goals and rules of the challenge on the screen for your reference, and they'll also be in the description for you to check out at any time. But beyond that, there's not much more for me to say, other than that I'm ready to get into the pit and start beating Bruno senseless again. Let's do this, old man. As usual, we'll start with water, which is probably Bruno's greatest weakness. Despite our new level cap of 78, Bruno's insistence on including double Onixes on his team means that his team of 5 is essentially a trio. But as for dealing with the fighting types, I ran the combination of Surf, Ice Beam, and Rain Dance on every Pokemon that could learn them, which, when combined with occasional Psychic coverage for the Pokemon that had it, was enough to get quick victories with all of the Pokemon shown on the screen. And then there's Magikarp. Given what it took to get Magikarp a win last time, I think it will come as no surprise that with limited items and a lowered level cap, this one was a no-go, which brings our initial count after water to 27 out of 28 wins. The grass type was pretty much just as easy as water, with a combination of Sleep Powder, Growth Giga Drain, and Sunny Day Solar Beam securing painless wins with all of the Pokemon in this type and bringing our total to 39 out of 40. With the fire type, the main concern was surviving the Onix's Earthquake long enough to take out the rest of the members of his team with strong stab moves such as Flamethrower and Fire Blast. But thankfully, this isn't actually much of an issue. Onix's special defense is abysmal, and in general, we were able to rely on these same moves, sometimes damage boosted with Sunny Day, to knock his Onixes out and then continue burning through the rest of his team. Once this type was finished, we move our score up to 51 out of 52. The flying type is interesting because, although super effective against the fighting type, all of the flying types in this game are also normal types, with defense that's adequate at best. Add on to this that Bruno has 2 rock types with super effective damage on his team, and it means that if we were to get hit by his fighting moves, most of these Pokemon would be nothing more than sitting ducks waiting in line to faint. It's lucky for us then that every flying type Pokemon here can also learn Steel Wing, a steel move that deals super effective damage to Bruno's Onixes and ensures that we're able to tell them to step off and clear the stage for us to pick off his fighting types with super effective flying damage. After we've secured wins with every Pokemon in this type, our score rises to 59 out of 60, and we move on to the normal type. The obvious challenge with this type is their survivability. Being weak to fighting means that practically any hit will send them to an early grave. On top of this, even if they could survive a hit from his fighting types, the fact that the Onix comes out first means they have to make it through a normal resistant physical tank before ever having the chance. Thankfully, this issue resolved itself through the fact that every Pokemon in this type could either learn Ice Beam or Iron Tail, 2 moves which trivialized the Onixes and gave our normal types the chance to either tear through his team with a strong special move like Psychic or Ice Beam, or to rely on his fighting type's weak physical defenses to allow stab return to finish the job. Within this type, all of the Pokemon on the screen were able to get a victory, with the only difficult line among them being Rattata, for whom I had to switch up the EV spread to favor defense, while hoping for either a crit or a lucky cross-chop miss on the Machamp to get the win. The most interesting member of this type, however, was Ditto, because as we learned last time, through the power of arcane magic, that is, leveling it up mid-battle after it's already transformed, we're able to get a buff upon defeating the first Onix, sending our Onix Ditto into maximum overdrive and earning us a satisfying victory over Bruno, proving once again that Bruno is so even his own Pokemon can beat him. Once the normal type has been completed, our total rises to 75 out of 76, and we're halfway done. Next up, I'd like to look at Bruno's favorite type, Grock. Although a lot of these Pokemon are weak to Bruno's team, our level advantage gives us enough speed to get a hit in with Earthquake before taking one ourselves, which, when taking into account his Onix's weakness to one of their own types, and his fighting Pokemon's low physical defense stat, is enough to get a victory for pretty much every Pokemon in this type. The core exceptions were, of course, the Ammonite and Kabuto lines, but in their case, they just traded Earthquake for the equally powerful Surf and Ice Beam, so they were understandably able to clear Bruno's team almost more easily than the rest of their Grock cousins, bringing our total number of victories up to 92 out of 93. To follow up Grock, we've come to that point in the video where we cover the uber powerful game-winning types that you rely on in the latter half of the game. Bruno, not being essentially doesn't have an answer to any of these, and so we were able to pad out our numbers with the Ghost type through Psychic, Ice through Ice Beam, Dragon through Ice Beam and Surf, and the Psychic type through... yeah, I don't think I need to tell you what we used on this one. With all of these types accounted for, we bring our total number of victories up to 108 out of 109. The fighting type is supposed to be Bruno's domain, but we learned a long time ago that we're better at commanding these Pokemon than he ever will be, primarily because we actually know that the Pokemon Mankey exists. Not only do these Pokemon have high physical attack stats that take advantage of their brethren's weak defense, but they also have access to strong physical moves such as Aerial Ace and Earthquake that tore through their enemies and brought us up to 115 out of 116 victories. The Electric type is up next, which wasn't incredibly difficult for the most part. Although each Pokemon here did need to find a way around the Onix, moves like Iron Tail, Thief, and Steel Wing were enough to knock them out and allow each of the Pokemon on the screen to work through Bruno's fighting types and find a victory. However, for Magnemite and Magneton, it wasn't so easy. In this game, although Magnemite does have the Steel type, it doesn't gain access to any useful Steel moves, which means our best bets against the Onixes are moves like Supersonic, Protect, Metal Sound, and the old reliable Return. Although good luck on Confusion and strong hits from Return would probably be enough for Magnemite to defeat the Onixes and make its way through the fighting types with Thunderbolt, within 20 attempts, this was a pretty tall order, and we ended up getting our second failure when it was unable to withstand the power of Earthquake. Magneton, on the other hand, while it didn't exactly have an easy time, was just strong enough to use the combination of Metal Sound and Return to defeat his younger brother's bullies and earn a victory in the little guy's place. When all is said and done, we finished the Electric type with 123 out of 125 victories, and jump over to Poison. Poison was a weird one for this challenge, because the movesets for these Pokemon are kind of all over the place, and we had to focus on different things for each of them to find a win. Ekans and Arbok, for example, were able to finish the fight with nothing more than Earthquake, while Zubat and Golbat were content to focus on Giga Drain for the Onixes and Wing Attack for the rest. Grimer and Muck, who naturally learned Sludge Bomb, were able to use its high power to devastating effect in finding their win, while Coughing and Wheezing relied on some fire-breathing lessons they took at the local community college to burn Bruno and his Pokemon to a crisp in pursuit of victory. Finally, for the Nidos, I focused on special attack, running moves such as Ice Beam and Blizzard, and hoping that their high base power would be enough to hard carry us in the fight. This generally ended up being the case, but on Nidoran Male, our victory did end up hinging on a clutch poison point to take out the Machamp before it was able to end our lives, which is why I've decided I'd like to award our little friend with the first annual Pokephenomenal Clutch God Award in honor of his guts and determination. You go, little dude. With the Poison type finished in total victory, our total rises to 137 out of 139, and we're left with a single type, our age-old enemy, the Bugs. Now, most of these Pokemon aren't an issue, with Mons like Butterfree, Venonat and Venomoth, and Paris and Parasect trouncing his team with special damage, while Beedrill, Scyther and Pinsir made it over the line through tactical uses of moves such as Brick Break, Steel Wing, Aerial Ace, and Earthquake. After I've picked up wins with the strong members of the type, our total sits at 145 out of 147, and we're on to our last 4. Last time around, these Pokemon gave us plenty of trouble even at level 100. In the end, it required a comprehensive combination of struggle,
leftovers,
and a lot of luck for them to summit the Bruno Mountain and claim their prize. With this in mind, I expected it to be even more of a pain with the lowered level cap and restriction on outside items, and that's exactly what we got. Although Struggle did a good deal of damage, his Onix was just too defensively tanky for us to make any headway, especially because Bruno consistently used a full restore to bring it back to life just as we were about to defeat it. Even for the Cocoons, who had the ability to buff up their defense before using Struggle, this ended up being a no-go, which finishes up our round 1 attempts and brings us to 145 out of 151 victories against Bruno. And now for round 2. Now, I'm just going to be honest out of the gate and say that, while I wish the same zany tactics from last time worked for the Bugs and Magikarp this time around, that just didn't end up being the case. When these fights were already so difficult to pull off at level 100 and with unlimited attempts, having 22 fewer levels and only 20 goes at the fight didn't do our little guys any favors, and I lost the fight again with Caterpie, Weedle, Metapod, Kakuna, and Magikarp. I think that if everything were to go right, at the very least Magikarp and the Cocoons could have a decent shot at this fight, but with our updated rule set and fewer attempts, I have to shamefully admit these ones go to Bruno. But the one fight that didn't go to Bruno in round 2 was Magnemite, who, having gained access to Hidden Power Psychic, launched a revenge-fueled mental blast that was strong enough to not only defeat Bruno's entire team, but also to mentally shatter the trainer himself, bringing an end to our recalculation of the Bruno BQ and leaving him a shell of the man he once was. And that's it, the end of our redo against Bruno. So, how did our challenge's namesake do? In round 1, we earned 145 out of 151 victories, which, when combined with the half point we picked up from Magnemite, brings us to 145.5 out of 151. Converting this to a BQ, we're left with 96, tied with Whitney. Of course, since Bruno ain't shit, we will be placing him underneath her, but it feels good to have earned a fair score against this opponent. As much as I like to clown on Bruno, I want to do it honestly. For the next BQ, it looks like I'll be challenging Gym Leader Norman, and sooner or later we'll also have to go back in and recalculate Sydney and Claire, so if you want to make sure you're around to see those videos, I would really encourage you to subscribe. But anyway, that's going to be it for me, so thank you again for watching, I hope you have a great day, and as always, stay phenomenal.